How you doing, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Harry, and for those of you that are new here, I'm about to start my third year of graduate entry medicine at the University of Limerick. Today I have a really exciting video. Many people in Ireland who have gone through the CAO will be finding out in the next few days if they've gotten into graduate medicine. And with that in mind, I wanted to create a really simple video just giving you an overview of graduate medicine and hopefully give you a flavour of what you can expect to see in your first year. Now, of course, this is just based on my experience, and so I do have a few disclaimers that I've put in the description, but I'll also briefly go over now. So this video is aiming to give anyone, not just from Limerick, but anywhere, an idea of the types of things that you can expect to see in your first year and an overview of how you might be examined. With that in mind, I do have some caveats to that. So the first of the caveats is that this is based on my personal experience going through grad med at the University of Limerick in the 2021-2022 academic year. Things change year on year, and so it's really important that whether you're going to Limerick or another university, you do keep up to date with all the information that the school provides you, including things like your school's handbook, which will outline everything you need to know, how you'll be examined and things like that. So firstly, don't rely on this video as a sole guide. This is just to give you an overview of what you can expect. And just to supplement that point, this information that I provide you with today is not exhaustive. I'm not going to go through every fine detail about the examinations and the things that you will learn day to day, mainly because not everyone watching this video is going to be going to the University of Limerick, and I'm trying to make this video more broad and applicable to many people that are thinking of grad med, not just those thinking of coming to the University of Limerick. Finally, do leave any questions you have in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And also, and I always mention this, if there are enough questions, and I do get some through social medias and also through YouTube, then I will endeavour to make another Q&A because I always think they're super useful. I can get through a lot of questions that people have and make them available to everyone as opposed to having to respond to every individual message. With all the formalities out of the way, let's talk grad med. So I'm sure you're all very excited. Hopefully many of you watching this have gotten into medicine and now you're thinking, what am I going to study and where am I going to start? The way our program is outlined is we have 3 core modules. Those are knowledge of health and illness, clinical and anatomical skills, and professional competencies. These are the 3 main modules, and the importance of these really lies in what you're going to have to learn and how you're going to be examined. You are going to have things that cross over, right? These are very integrated modules. Like a lot of things in medicine, there's so much crossover, and it really is important that you understand how things are connected. And a lot of the things that you will learn between these modules are interconnected. So the first module we're going to talk about is knowledge of health and illness. This is a very, very large module with an enormous amount of content. But let's talk a little bit about what it is, how it's taught, and how it's examined. So really, knowledge of health and illness, you're looking at the human body, structure, so anatomy, function, physiology, pharmacology. Everything is really incorporated into this module. It is divided in our course into certain modules, and I really wanted to highlight this because I know different schools are going to have different ways of breaking up how you learn systems. So for example, our school looks at modules like life structure, life cycle, maintenance, protection, support, control, and there's 2 introductory cases at the beginning of the year. So with problem-based learning, you have these modules, and they'll be, or blocks as you might call them, right? These might be blocks of 4 to 6 weeks, and they're going to encompass problem-based learning cases that surround an overarching topic, and that's where these structure, cycle, maintenance ideas come into it. Now, it's important to say that other schools might have blocks where they teach you a system, so they might do cardiology, then the respiratory system, and then neurology. They might break things up in that way, and then they might go back to those systems and now look at the pathological aspects of those. Different schools have different methods for this, but again, you are ultimately learning the same information. So as I say, with this problem-based learning, you're learning in these blocks of structure, cycle, maintenance as opposed to those systems, and the main reason for that is that each week you're dealing with a new patient, and I'll talk a little bit more about PBL in a moment, but just to say that you're dealing with different PBL cases, but each case is a patient, and of course, there can be lots of systems involved in a pathology, and you can't just focus on one when you're dealing with problem-based learning. And finally, with a problem-based learning, what you'll find, and I will show you a timetable later in the video, often the contact hours might be slightly less than a more didactic style, but a lot of those free hours that you have are obviously time that you're going to need to study and read up on things to be prepared for your next session. So the demands outside of contact hours are certainly very high. Knowledge of health and illness, how is it taught? So we have 2 problem-based learning sessions a week. associated with a new case. So in first year, you would have a new case every Tuesday. So what would happen is you would come into the session and you will have a clinical tutor, and then you will have 8 to 10 people in your PBL group. So you'll all be in a room. So with problem-based learning, you're going to be, as a group, talking through a new case, a new patient every single week. And so how that's going to work is your tutor and the 8 of you are going to work through the case. And how that's structured is you'll get an initial patient presentation, and then from there you'll methodically work down through the case, and the tutor at each point will stop and open up discussion or start questions to try and have the group come up with ideas and start thinking about what might be going on, next steps, and thinking about where there are gaps in your knowledge. And that's what PBL aims to do. You talk through a case, you find the gaps in your knowledge, and you go away and come back to the next session having filled those gaps. So you'll get the initial patient presentation, and then the tutor will open up the room. You guys will discuss what you think might be happening, maybe differential diagnosis, things like that. And then you'll get more information. So once you've talked through all that and you've answered some questions that your tutor might have posed to you guys, so then you might get further information, and then you might do a clinical examination, and then you might send them off for some tests. And then there might be a diagnosis, a prognosis. And so there's a very methodical way through which you get the information throughout the week. So as I say, you'll get the new case on the Tuesday, you'll go through some of the information, you'll develop learning objectives. And those could be anything from anatomy learning objectives, pharmacology, physiology, any gaps in your knowledge whatsoever, or even just basic sciences, right? So preclinical learning is all about, all of these learning objectives are going to be very broad-based, all the biomedical sciences. So you're going to expect a lot of information. To supplement this PBL learning that you're going to be having, you'll also have lectures throughout the week, normally dedicated to the topic that the PBL case is associated with. So for example, if you're dealing with a renal case, you might have one of the consultants from UHL come in and give a lecture and give you a lot of information, clinical information, relevant information that you can take and add that to your learning for problem-based learning. You also have anatomical skills sessions twice a week. So you'll also be learning anatomy alongside the cases. So of course the anatomy will be associated often with the PBL case, but not always. Over your first 2 years, there will be some cases where you might be doing very specific bits of anatomy that aren't necessarily exactly relevant to your case. There are 33 PBL cases in each year. And what I should have said with PBL to tie in the lectures and the anatomy, by the way, is that when you go away from the Tuesday session, you will have learning objectives. You could have 8 learning objectives, you could have 10, 12, 14, whatever it is. Some of them are large, some of them are small. And they could be to outline, for example, the anatomy of a certain area of the body, or it could be to find out the methods of action of certain drugs and side effects and things like that. So you go away from PBL and you come back to the session with that knowledge. So you've gone away, you've learned the different learning objectives, and you come back into PBL on the Friday. What then happens is the tutor will write down all your names, maybe on paper, or they'll use a spin the wheel app or something like that, and your name will be randomly drawn from that, and whichever learning objective is next on the list, you will go up and teach the class using the whiteboards. You can draw things and collectively discuss the LO with your classmates, with the idea being that everyone makes sure they're on the same page, up to the same speed, and can contribute different things based on the resources that they used. And so that's the principle behind how your PBL cases will work. And of course, between the lectures, the anatomy sessions, and your problem-based learning, that's really giving you a good grounding in what knowledge of health and illness will look to test. So how is it examined? Now again, this is one of these slides where I have to remind you about the caveats. This was the split for when I sat my exams. This may not be the case for you, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how you might expect to be examined when you're casting such a wide net in terms of what you're learning. So if we have a look at the slide that I've made here, your short answer question or SAQ paper consists of 36% of your grade. SAQ paper consists of a 2-hour exam, and essentially it's broken up into 6 questions, and those will have sub-questions within. Normally, the heading might be associated with one condition that was associated with a problem-based learning case that you did in that time. However, the sub-questions can still draw from other cases. So again, this goes back to this idea of a spiral curriculum. So when you're doing PBL and you're having lectures and you're doing anatomy, you're coming across things again and again. And within the first 2 years of your learning and your preclinical learning, you will be reviewing things, some things multiple times. Some things will come up again and again to the point where they'll nearly frustrate you, but they are really trying to emphasize certain points. So for example, the heading might be multiple myeloma. And that might have been the main topic of one of the cases, but it is to say that all the sub-questions could draw from other things based on what's happening to the patient. The EMQ, which is the extended matching question, or multiple choice questions, MCQ, is another exam. So that's those two combined. For example, you could have a set of presentations of a patient and a set of different nerves that have been affected. This is just an example of an EMQ. So based on the presentation that you can see on one side, you should be able to match what nerve is being affected based on that patient's presentation. Then finally, the anatomy spotter. So this is going to be 25 stations. So each station is an image, but there'll be 2 questions associated with it. So you might be asked to, for example, name an anatomical structure in the first question, and the second question might be more related to its function or a pathology in that area. That's not always the case. Again, as I say, these are just kind of overview of what you might expect. And there are 2 examination periods mainly with KHI. So you're going to have Christmas, which is worth 30%, and summer, which is worth 70% of the overall grade. And within that, that's how the split of SIQ, EMQ, and anatomy were broken down. Again, this was 2021, 22. They might move this around. And I will swing back just to say that the integrated nature of the modules is that, yes, this is knowledge of health and illness, but again, things you're learning in clinical skills, examinations that you're doing on each other and on models and things like that, are relevant to things you might be asked in KHI. So of course it's all connected, but it's just to try and give you some sort of structure. So clinical and anatomical skills. So really we're looking at clinical procedures, patient examination, communication skills, and interpretation of results. So this is going to be bread and butter of being in a hospital, being in a clinical setting. Patient examinations, this includes models, examining your colleagues, and simulated patients. So the school also has some people who come in and are actors in a way, in that they'll come in and present with typical features, or they might come in and your group will take a history from them. In terms of communication skills, so empathy, building rapport, and delivering bad news, all those kind of really important communication skills that you need as a doctor, you'll be learning. And interpretation of results, so things like your ECGs, your bloods, your glucose, urinary dipstick, all of those kind of things you're going to be learning in clinical skills. So how's it taught? So you have 2 2-hour sessions a week, and again, this is as it was timetabled for me. The examination that you do might be relevant to the PBL case. Now I have to say, often it may not be, and this is just because you will get through a lot of new examinations pretty quickly in your first year and even in your first semester. And so you'll not necessarily be seeing things for the first time when it's associated with a PBL case. For example, some of your bread and butter exams, like your cardio exam, right? You will do that many, many times in your first 2 years. So you might have a patient that has had a myocardial infarction, and you happen that week to have clinical skills that is doing the cardio exam. You might have, someone's had a stroke and you might be looking to do a neuro exam, just as an example. But the point is that you will have multiple cases that might be associated with the cardiovascular system. But once you've done the cardio exam once, it doesn't mean you won't return to it. Spiral curriculum, you definitely will return to it. You might just be looking at things in more detail. One big tip, and something that I realized that was difficult to adjust to in medical school, is that the first time you do any exam, you're not going to be perfect at it. And you're also maybe not even going to understand all of the different kind of maneuvers and examinations you're doing at that time, but you will come back to exams time and time again, and as you do, you'll dive deeper into, okay, now I understand what I'm doing, I know the process. Why am I doing each procedure? Why do I need to know this? What might be an abnormal presentation, and what might I expect to see, and what does that mean for the patient? So all those kind of things come as you begin to see these examinations more and more. These are taught in small group sessions, right? So this consists of a clinical tutor and your PBL group. So again, that can be 8 to 10 people, right? So your PBL group is going to be with you in that clinical skills. How is it examined? So again, a really important caveat with this one, I have not given you specifics of breakdowns and things like that, because clinical skills definitely does change year on year, and certainly has in the last few years given COVID. So my year was less affected by COVID, but the previous 2 years had significant changes as a result of COVID. So you never know what's around the corner, so it's important to say that this examination was just I believe, how it was done not in the 2021-22 period, but in the 2022-23 period. And this is in my case. So just to give you an idea of how you can expect clinical skills to be examined. You have 2 OCASI exams, one in February and one in June. OCASIs are the same as OSCEs, so if you've heard of OSCEs, often in the UK and elsewhere, they are OCASIs here, right? It's just an objective clinical and anatomical skills exam. And then tutor-based assessments. So sometimes a small portion will go for outside of the February and June period. Yourself and a colleague will go into an examiner and you'll each do 6 minutes. You'll be given an examination to do. So the tutor might say, okay, do a respiratory exam. So you do a respiratory exam and your colleague, and then your colleague will be asked to do an exam. They might be asked to do an abdominal exam. Each OCASI, so each of February and June, they consist of 8 stations, 2 of which are rest stations. So it's really 6 stations. The 6 stations can be anything from taking a history, doing an examination, or even information giving. So again, things that you can learn, of course, might be showing a patient how to use an inhaler. So just to be aware that there are multiple different types of skills you can be asked. So long as you meet the minimum pass mark and you haven't hit a red flag, then you should be all good. Just a quick note, and I won't go too deep into this, but certain red flags, like for example, not washing your hands, would be an instant red flag and you would fail that station. So professional competencies. This module is really about other aspects of the job, maybe outside of the typical sciences that you have to learn as a doctor, but are still really important. So there are modules like public health, psychology, sociology, health law and ethics, and I've put an asterisk beside biostats in my slides. And the main reason for that is biostatistics is actually examined in first year. In UL, again, if you're in UL medicine, is normally examined in first year as a KHI question in the SAQ exam. It can come up in other places as well, but it is a KHI first year module, but then in second year it becomes part of professional competencies. Just in terms of how it's examined, again, that may have changed since I was in first year, but that's how we were taught biostats. So I put it here in professional competencies because in second year that will be the case for you, but in general it is examined in KHI. Briefly looking at these modules, health law and ethics, of course many people will know that, as doctors, one of the most difficult thing is to really have a good understanding of the laws that govern what you do sometimes, and that can be a real challenge because you're learning so much about medicine and how to treat people and how to do things properly, but then of course there are ethical dilemmas and there are challenges that face medicine, especially in the modern day with AI and all things modern healthcare and technology that are making it very, very difficult to understand sometimes where the boundaries are. This module really looks to give you just an overview of some important considerations that you have to have from a legal point of view and even going forward with your career. Public health, so of course as a medical student and then beyond as a doctor, you will have a good understanding, a reasonably good understanding of health practices and things like that, but then how do we communicate that to the public? So that kind of looks at those sorts of things. So sociology then might look at, for example, things like labeling and how and stigmas in medicine and how certain things and the way we phrase them, how can that behavior affect people. Psychology, of course, so looking at certain behaviors of humans' feelings and emotions, and really important things to consider about when thinking about patients and patient care. And biostatistics, of course, research is incredibly important and at the heart of medicine. How modern medicines, technology, AI, how that all develops. And it's important to really have a mathematical, a baseline, very much a baseline understanding of how certain research papers will communicate the results that they have so that you can determine how relevant certain research is. One thing the lecturer will mention to you, certainly from our perspective, you won't be doing lots of mathematical calculations in that exam. It's more to understand different ideas in terms of mathematical communication, so things like odds ratios or Kaplan-Meier curves and things like that. How is professional competencies taught? So you will have lectures from professors of each of those disciplines that I just mentioned. You will also have an early patient contact program. So I mentioned those disciplines. There are also a couple of other aspects to the professional competencies module. And the stress, self-care and building resilience for medical students and doctors is also a component of your first year. The stress, self-care module is again really about thinking about yourself and making sure that as you go through what is a very demanding, very taxing career, and even through your medical school years when the study and stress can sometimes ask a lot of you, that you really are still grounded and really are still able to look after yourself so that you can look after others. The early patient contact program, so you will be assigned a general practitioner, a GP, and yourself and 8 others will be assigned that GP, and then you'll be split into 2 groups of 4. Again, this is how it was done for me. If the numbers of the course change year on year, then that might affect how many are in each group. But roughly, you have 8 people assigned to a GP, and they will be in a group of 4 and a group of 4. You will each be assigned a patient in that general practice. Normally, they will have some sort of chronic illness, so that you can essentially follow their journey over the first 2 years, or your preclinical years. You will have a certain amount of times when you will meet with this patient. That could be online, or sometimes in person, or maybe with the GP in their practice. And you will talk about a lot of different aspects, how it's impacting the patient, how their condition has changed over time, how they're feeling about it, how their medications might have changed, or how their treatment is going, essentially. So then how is professional competencies examined? So normally, again, for first year, we had case reflections for 4 of the disciplines. So you would ignore biostatistics of the ones that I mentioned. So around November time, we were given topics for each of the reflections from the professors. And from there, we had to submit these. And it was the first 4 weeks of January when you come back. You submit them once a week. They were each due. And they could be related to a topic that you would have covered in professional competencies within your first semester. So in those lectures that you're having week to week. And so that accounts for 60% in our case. And then you have a workshop and oral presentation. You would present to your whole year, which is quite a lot for us, but we were split into half. So you would have half the year going in the morning session, half the year going in the evening session, and you would present as your group of 8. So as I said, you have 2 groups of 4 in the one GP practice, but you each group of 4 has a patient assigned them. But then when you come to do the presentation, you do it all together. Really talking about your patient and their care and everything surrounding how your experience of the early patient contact program went. Also relating to each of the 4 disciplines. So sample timetable, I really quickly wanted to just mention the timetable just to give you a rough idea. So here's a timetable from my second year, just to give you an idea. So you can see the orange boxes represent your PBL. So I had PBL from half 8 to half 11. Normally it would be 9 to 12, but that group is slightly different. And then again on the Thursday. Now I should say as a first year, you will actually be the Tuesday and the Friday, but I just took a more recent timetable. You can see on a Wednesday all these grey boxes. Any grey boxes are lectures. So you can see we had a lot of lectures that week associated with this was a renal week, so we had a lot of lectures associated with that, and some professional competency lectures, etc. We had 2 clinical skills, 1 on circulation, 1 on history taking and presenting to colleagues, and then we had 2 anatomy practicals there as well. So you can see that the week does have a good few gaps, and you can see you're really going from 9 to 4 o'clock is normally when your contact hours are, and outside of that you have plenty of study to be doing. Advice. So finally, I wanted to finish on a couple of pieces of advice, especially for those of you starting graduate medicine, regardless of where you're going. And this is a really, really important thing to understand. It doesn't matter whether you're going to be doing PBL or you're going to be doing didactic learning. We are all on a journey to become doctors, and so there are some things that are universal and you should take on board, and I think are really helpful. And these tips will hopefully be helpful to you. The first is get organized and be consistent. So really with medicine, I think one of the unique things people realize, even with a graduate program, is, and in fact especially with a graduate program, you've gone through college before and you've done well enough to make it into graduate medicine. The thing is with medicine that mightn't be the case with everyone's undergrad is that you have to be consistent from early doors if you want to do well. And the reason why is because it is just such a large amount of information that you're expected to retain, that if you don't start early, you simply will not have the time. You could be a very, very smart individual, but if you can't absorb this information extremely quickly, then you need to give yourself enough time. And even if you can absorb information quickly, it is still a lot of information and you need to start early. So get organized, keep the information that you receive organized, and be consistent with your study week to week. Adjusting to year 1, semester 1 takes time. Don't be afraid to ask upper years for resources and help. And I always say this, and one of the reasons I started YouTube, I always mention this, is to help people along a journey I've always had challenges with. And that goes right from the GAMSAT, which I still tutor to this day, to help people along their journey getting into medicine. But now, even as I go through it, I want to give back the information that I have received to help people, especially those who mightn't have other people around them that have gotten into medicine and really don't have a lot of information to hand. But always, upper years are your best friend. They will really help you out and can give you the resources you need. We all learn in different ways. Experiment early, then stick to what works for you. This is so important, and I really do mean this. I'm probably guilty of having spent too long trying to figure out what works. And what often happens is you have so many colleagues that you'll speak to and they'll say, oh, I use this resource and I use that resource and I use this platform to keep my notes on and I use this platform to keep my notes on. And you'll find that if you just listen to what everyone said, you'd be bombarded with so many different resources and ways of learning that you would never, ever kind of hit the ground running. And so what I can say is that in the early doors, first semester, first year, by all means, experiment with different types. See what works week to week. PBLs are a good test for you. See what kind of information you're learning. See if there's ways and means that are working best for you, and then eventually stick to that. It doesn't matter if other people have different ways. Someone's using Anki and you're not, then suddenly they tell you a week before exams and you feel like you have to. You don't. When you find something that works for you, by all means work. If something's not working for you, stop and change. It might seem like simple advice, but you'd be amazed. It takes a while to really figure that out. And I do mean that. Even having done an undergrad, I found that the way that I learn now is very different to my undergrad. Finally, get involved in extracurricular roles and activities. Med takes up enough of your time, so make sure you allocate enough time to detach from it. I enjoyed getting involved in both activities and roles associated with med, like I did class rep in first year, and I was on the medical society committee in second year as a sports officer, but also outside. I played some football for the university outside of the medicine organised activities that we had, and really, really enjoyed that as well. So it's important to have activities and social life and things going on outside to keep your sanity, and also it is possible to have a life, and that kind of goes back to the consistency. If you're consistent, then you will make time for those things. If you let this get on top of you, then you won't. So that concludes this video. I hope that this was helpful, and I want to reiterate to everyone that is either thinking of getting in, you haven't gotten in yet, or you've gotten into medicine, congratulations to you, and keep going. Whatever part of that journey you're on, you're gonna get there. I know it's a long slog, I know it's really tough, but at each stage you have these little wins. When you get into medical school, that's a big win. Celebrate that, enjoy that. And one final thing as well is, I know people will say, oh, what can I do before I start? Enjoy that period of time before you start. It's gonna hit you hard and quickly. So once you're in, get moving. But in that time before you start medicine, just enjoy it. And I really hope to see so many of you that follow me on this journey, follow me in this journey, and create your own journey. It's your own path, of course. But yeah, thank you so much for watching the videos. I really appreciate it. I know I haven't been that consistent with getting things up. Any videos you'd like to see, please leave them down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, please share. I really want to help as many people as possible. So any of you guys that share my videos and watch the content, it means so much to me. So thank you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. For now though, bye-bye.